moving on to the main talk about what's really happening out in the market from the Learning Council research perspective. I'm LeiLani Cauthen, CEO and publisher. I'm going to talk about learning leadership versus systemic inequities. And if you haven't downloaded the special report on the same topic on the Learning Council site, please do. When we were just in Atlanta last week, one of the executives from Cobb County actually used that special report in her talk to introduce really why Cobb is doing what they're doing based on the data that the Learning Council does with our big national survey every year. So the whole audience got to be involved in that there in Atlanta. And also we talked a lot about it when we were live in Dallas. So a lot of school districts really getting this message, which is the future is hybrid logistics. And if you don't know what that is, you're about to know. So I'm going to go over that with you. Let me start first with saying the biggest school administrative pressure per our research is a hidden one. It's space and time. So you heard New York talk about earlier the fact that they're all back in. They're live with no remote option. Places like California passing AB 1, now they have live, or every district has to have a fully online option. Most other places in the country are doing hybrid simultaneous, which means teaching live kids in front of you and teaching ones that are coming in via Zoom link or however they're coming in, and then maybe also an online option. So we've reached this point now where students are demanding remote flexibility. That's going to continue as long as there's viruses. And then a master schedule complexity that's just gone off the charts. Like last year when we were talking to a lot of you guys in New York and New Jersey, we were hearing things like there's AB weeks. There's staged rollout time. So when you start the school year, you have like this group can come in this week, and then we're going to get the next group in, the next group. There's also AB days, sometimes full Fridays off where everyone is remote still. There's things like the structure of how you use buildings and how social distancing works. Like this group can come in to this half of the building, but not the other half of the building. And then you have things like changed block schedules. So you moved to a non-Carnegie unit looking day, where maybe there's a block that's longer for one subject and much shorter for another, more homeroom time, all that other stuff. So essentially all the software out there that does anything with calendaring and pacing guides is just not useful. And in fact, when I was talking to Oregon the other day, they're like, yeah, there's nothing out there that even approaches doing real logistics at the order of magnitude of like FedEx and Amazon, getting anything anywhere in the world in 24 hours just doesn't exist in terms of the scheduling complexity of K-12. So we're onto that because this is the number one problem now. And it has a lot to do with not having any admin time. Like every superintendent we talk to is like, yeah, I'm in another mask battle and it's just never ending over here. They don't really get to run anything because they're always doing that. And then the constant battles in terms of like with parents who say, I'm just opting out, I'm out. I only want to come in because I'm 50 miles out from the main town or whatever. I only want to come in like, when I have yoga twice a week, and then I want to bring my child in. And that's when you need to deliver that child the hands-on science labs and the music and the sports stuff. That's the only time I want to come. So during the pandemic, what parents learned was that they could buy or subscribe to just about anything having to do with learning. And this was a huge mental shift for Americans when they're looking at what you're delivering and executing on. Now, the position of most schools is teachers are the central pin of all things, and they're, we got to have physicality. True, we like to be together. Humans do love that, but maybe not all the time. So there's a lot of parents that discovered their kid did better in remote learning. And so now what they really want is something that lives between the two worlds. They want the human interaction some of the time, and then they want online with maybe live teaching going on at the same time or sometime also. So this is what's actually the next stage of growth for all K-12 schools nationally to remain competitive. So where we were in 2019 was we had 27% of the United States population had already opted out. They're like, nope. Well, charters are still public, right? So that, you got to kind of take that into consideration. That was 6% of the market. But homeschooling was already growing at 20% annually before the pandemic. And we only had 73% of the kids. Now, with the pandemic where we're at right now, if you're looking at the chart, raise your hand if you have questions or you want to stop me anytime along the way. Feel free. The average defection away from traditional public was 3.6% to any alternative. That could be homeschooling, that could be private. So many districts are experiencing well above that even now. Even when they try to go back to full on, in person, they got even more of a defection. Some of them recovered many of their students. Like when we were talking to Dallas ISD last week, the 13,600 or so kids that they lost, they got a good portion of them back. But the estimate now nationwide is that 33.6 have opted out. That's conservative. The median number is over 5 million students, and the losses are continuing in 2021. Why? Surges, other issues, don't want my student to get that, not going there. So those are the things that are happening within public education. And I'm only telling you this because for the first time, public education is feeling a lot of heat from competition. And they're getting communication from parents and students, the likes of which they've never seen, about the sophistication of commercial grade subscription delivery and online schooling that's available in the market that a lot of K-12 has never seen. They don't see the stuff that's being marketed directly to the public because those companies don't sell to K-12. And you'll see, if you're watching TV at all right now, you're seeing the commercials from ABC Mouse and Stride and K-12 and all these other companies. So number two, biggest pressure, staffing. Administrators are citing inordinate struggles finding teachers and staff. And there's, of course, political complications right now to this. So the issues are, how are we going to do this? And you have to really think with, I can't kill off any more of my teachers by double loading them. What am I going to do? I have to start thinking about a reduction in my human delivery and using more text so that I elevate the humans I do have to the perfected use of their humanity. How do I do that? And maybe the whole group situation of teaching and learning grade, whole group, blah, blah, everybody moving down the assembly line, maybe that's in question. And that's what we're going to talk about. So right now, here's some other data for you. Most teachers are feeling overwhelmed. This is a January 21 survey. Even when most schools were back live, with maybe some remote still and some online, teachers are feeling overwhelmed and burnt out. So a lot of like what New York was talking about earlier, there's been a really heavy lift of moving everyone to digital, and that's really not over yet. Everyone didn't build every single lesson plan. And then also, here's another hidden reason. Most teachers feel they're unable to easily personalize learning for students in the changed conditions. Most teachers. So the ones that say they're personalizing, 53%, 47% unable to easily personalize. What that means to you is that the things that commercial grade software can do, which is, you have your lesson, you're pre-tested, you have your lesson in the courseware, and then you're coasting along at your level as a student. The teacher can set the gate, the digital gate, to allow you to move forward or hold you there to remain in whole group. But if you missed something, software automatically branches you over to re-instruct you or reteach you, and then retests you forward. That's an automatic thing in a lot of software today. Teachers being able to not only build every lesson, but build all those branches, it's really hard, and it's really not being done at scale. So they're also overly sidetracked into repetitive distribution and collection of assignments, resources, or communications. 60% say this. If you think about what it's like to run an analog classroom, you wrote on the board at the end of the class, here's the chapter you got to read, and tomorrow we're going to have a test, blah, blah, blah. When kids came in with their essays and assignments and things, they dropped them on your desk and you picked up paper and you shuffled through that. Now, in the digital world, you're posting in your LMS, you're distributing the LMS, you're making every kid gets the right thing. Or if you're using Google or Microsoft, you're email distributing or posting somewhere and telling people instructions. And then somebody got lost and they couldn't find it, a folder or whatever. And so there's all this extra digital traffic that wasn't in the analog world. This is not being seen by a lot of administrators. But when you check with teachers, they'll tell you not only that's happening, but there's also all this added traffic. Now that's everything that a parent can get on their phone. They're asking questions. They're texting me, they're emailing me. And now I have even more traffic on me that I didn't used to have. I used to sort of ignore those guys that had to physically come in the building to see me. But now here I am. All right. So when we ask teachers, and this is a preliminary report on our 2021 ongoing survey right now, how many hours do you spend per week on that back and forth digital traffic, logins, which contents, if they didn't have a single sign-on, this happens, even though they might have single sign-on, maybe some teachers using a random app that nobody put behind the single sign-on yet. And so kids lost their password to that. That does happen. So which content am I supposed to do? Okay, I got the wrong content. I'm not ready for the test. Student and parent email, system monitoring, all those things that are more digital traffic distribution and administrative function than the direct instruction of the student. 30%, 10 plus hours a week. This is huge. This is a huge burden on teachers, and it's invisible to most administrators. 5 to 10 hours a week, 18%. You can kind of see the numbers there. Third biggest pressure is lost achievement. This is not a small thing. I even think it's worse than it says from the survey. 51% of students lost achievement. So now you're having a scramble. And if you're building your digital lesson bricks in your path, you're laying down the brick path, it's really hard for a teacher to go, okay, I'm over here. What folder is that? Where am I at? How do I find that in the LMS? Oh, but this student is this far behind. Now I got to figure out how to make his little path and distribute that to that particular student to catch them up. It's hard. And so let's just look at what happened in the last year in terms of dramatic tech adoption. So we had a $7.5 billion increase in spend. This is 2020. That was a big spike, the biggest spike we've ever seen, obviously, because CARES Act 1 came in, but then we had 2 more stimuluses. So we're conservative when we say hardware will spike again this year. It will continue to be up by that 4.5 billion over 2019 and increase more, another 400 million. Why? Because a lot of school districts couldn't even get the devices they needed. They were back ordered. And then in terms of digital versus paper, you've got digital curriculum up by 2.1 billion last year. We think it'll be up another 2 billion this year because people bought their devices and now they need all the software and they're messing around in the software markets and trying to find stuff. Paper resources will be down again. Here's the big one. Consumer comparison of spend was going down. The consumer market was starting to wane when the pandemic came in. And then in March and April, it took off. It was up by over $1 billion in just 6 months. So now it's a roaring rate of increase of 25%. This means Americans are shopping for alternatives to traditional public education. And it means that you as a school or district need to level up your game. So it's not just about automating the old way we delivered whole group instruction. It's about a whole dimensional shift of executing at the commercial grade expectation of learning games, right? Like this is awesome stuff, totally engaging with a kid, levels them, they get to pace alone. This is awesome. And that's a trick, right? That's hybrid logistics. So number 5, complexity. Digital models are really, really hard in K-12 education. They're the hardest market anywhere. There aren't commercial side companies that run this much software. No one runs this much software except for K-12, not even higher ed. You have your student information system, your learning management system, your grading, your badging, your testing, your facilities management, your professional development platform. And then you've got a gazillion apps, grade by grade. Every grade you may go from one teacher to the next teacher, and one's using Microsoft and the other one's using Google. It's kind of ridiculous what's happening out there, but the sheer weight of the software infrastructure is really heavy on K-12. So it's really important to get a handle on your model. This is the ideal scene model in terms of like how you think about it for most of K-12 that the Learning Council put out last year. So the real digital transition that's happening right now is that we're leaving that whole group world you see on the left of this slide, and we're in the middle of a mutation. And I want you to notice something about the mutation. The mutation means you're running 2 operations, one that looks highly distributed digitally and is almost one-to-one, small group, and the other one is very bureaucratic and structured on age and grade and class, maybe course. moving in the direction of fully personalized learning as a distributed service, which actually flips your organizational chart and makes it so that whole group is mutated to something we call dynamic cohorting based on pace, not necessarily competency. That scares a lot of school districts. Getting everybody to full competency in everything is not really a human condition, but being able to cohort based on pace is really real, because we kind of do that now. So this thing that I'm talking about, hybrid logistics, is happening. We came up with a concept through all of our research in 2018, started writing about it, and then we started a game. See the game board up on your top right. We played in the field all through 2019. Gary LaMonaco will probably remember that. It is actually the Uberization of learning. It would put kids together based on their pace, or individuals with the individual teacher based on their pace. And it was then found to be a major discussion also in other countries, starting with Israel in 2020. You can see their board here. They did pretty much the same thing we as the Learning Council had done in late 2018. So here's the structure in your special report. Number one, this is the way people structure, and it's not normal. It looks maybe normal, but it's not. Digital traditional with this zinger alt schedule. Your schedule just went and blew up on you. So your daily rotations, your weekly rotations, your hours and blocks rotations just made scheduling a PhD level master art that is mysterious and still doesn't maybe work very well. So students in this structure are still moving class to class. You notice this gray triangle over on your left. Notice the teacher's work. The teacher's workload to whole group in terms of class management, managing all the knowledge resources, fully planning and driving all learning is a lot. And it's not really even a human job anymore. And that needs to be observed by most administrators. Now, the second one is blended flipped, which is largely the same, except now you tell your teachers, we're going to do flipped learning. And that means take your lesson plan, if you built it already, and segment it so that it's definitely a dividing line between what is done live in class for hands-on and discussion and lecturing and what is done in homework. Hopefully with an attitude by the school or district of actually aggregating how much homework is on every student every night. If you're going to try to have every single teacher do blended, then you have a 24-hour workload on every student every evening. It's not going to work. So that's a big second model. A third model is competency-based contemporary. You're going to find this with the online or small private schools, right? Because maybe they only have one or two teachers and they have many kids at different age grades. So they automatically went to a pace-based model of pre-built, reliable full curriculum map. So with a full curriculum map, every student is put at the right point on every subject, and they're individually pacing, very little lecture, and there's oversight, sort of guide work by teachers with a lot of one-on-one instruction to help kids overcome whatever it is that they're messed up on. But that model, it has signal indication into this future world of hybrid logistics because it's a very workable model and it's highly personalized. It's just never been able to scale. And that's what we're going to talk about. So the fully online traditional is an online school. It's like the student doesn't come in. They're over there and we're serving them over there. And probably we're mostly trying to do it without as much human intersection as they'd get live if they were in the building. The fully online contemporary model is the consumer model. This is straight up, straight to the student, anytime, anywhere. If you need help, they're using live chat and chat bots. Sometimes they may have a live scheduled Zoom class, but most of the time they're not executing that way. There's very little lecture because it's a cost to the online institution to put in that much live human interaction. Then this model came out during the pandemic called the hybrid simultaneous traditional. It's delivering everything you've ever delivered with some live kids in front of you and then a lot remote. So you're delivering via video like we're doing right now, but you also have live kids in front of you. This was like a recipe for overwhelm for teachers because it's hard to run the remote class without maybe delegating one of the kids to watch all the other kids who are, and the live class at the same time. That's hard. It can be done. Some teachers are really good at it. Now, this is the new model that we started talking about a couple of years ago. Hybrid Logistics Contemporary actually reorganizes your physical space and your digital space into one seamless unit. This model is an on-demand network model. It's Uberizing teachers. It takes that contemporary model of paced learning and puts every student in every subject at their own pace. Therefore, as the students move through, if the teacher sets a cohort, because it's still live instruction, if they set it at 10, when the 10th student arrives, that automatically triggers the meeting and the meeting space to be used. If one of those 10 is a remote only student, they would get the link to the Zoom meet to come in via Zoom. And then when that intersection moment is done, and it's probably a shorter one, unless it's a science project, hands-on kind of thing or something like that, they move back into a homeroom. So many houses, like, Harry Potter world houses, you have maybe 4 or 5 of them on your same campus, different age groups. But teachers are now released from the massive classroom work of managing and discipline everyone, and they're honed in on watching dashboards, going in and helping kids that are late on a cohort, rearranging a student's schedule. So like you're supposed to spend an hour on math today, but you're way ahead in language and you're behind in math. So you're going to do 2 hours today in math because we're playing catch up with you. So algorithmically shifting even down to the individual student, the schedule for the days and weeks is part of this algorithmically inferred logistics part. So that's that model. I'm sure you guys have a million questions. Please raise your hands and ask them. But the space rework would sort of look like this. As you can see, these little students in the homeroom, the house, this student is on math step 4. This student is on language step 10. This one's on science. This one's on history. This one's on coding. These 2 kids have been Uberized to run out and meet in a lab or someplace else. These other kids are in motion to a class right now. There's always an oversight leader in the classroom. Here's a teacher that came into the house and took several kids aside because they wanted, she wanted to give them extra help. So teachers would have offices, maybe converted classrooms, and they're roving. Unlike the students roving and the teacher being stationary, teachers are now roving and kids are a little bit more stationary. Hoping you guys are going to ask me some questions. All right, so the last model, and the one we think that most of America will go to, and the one we've been in the most conversations with to demonstrate hybrid logistics too, and have the discussions about how it can be done, is the hybrid high flex. And this is being talked about by some of the most advanced districts in the country. And that is retaining this traditional model, but instead carving out a couple of hours, maybe every day, or maybe one day a week, that is Uberized. It's the hybrid logistics model. So that would be for remedial for those students who are then they're all in a homeroom at that time, or extracurricular. It's time to study and catch up on every other subject kind of a thing. But that way, that Uberized intensive education for some students in some subjects, or more extracurricular for ones who are excelling in all the other subjects, it is real. As long as you have a hybrid logistics infrastructure. So the future of hybrid logistics is pop-ups on your phone or your Chromebook or your laptop saying, hey, your math class will start in 3 minutes, room 10B. Here's the link if you're coming in virtual. So this is a disruptive technology coming into K-12. And it's been researched by Learning Council to Uberize and precisely harness your human teacher's real skill. So that in class, they're actually teaching, not just, doing catch-up work while the students are reading stuff some of the time. It changes the nature of the human intersection to be very precisely used for the human skill that our teachers have. So it's a software ecosystem is what it's what's being created to automate pacing guides, which is one of the least automated areas of the market. It's very flat. Most school districts, when we researched, a good 85%, they only had PDFs of pacing guides, Excel spreadsheets, or other sort of Word documents. Here's your stuff for 6th grade math, and there's 16 documents you got to review. Lesson schedules, all school space use, and the intersection of students all in a new way. So this is the full definition of a hybrid logistics interchange, like I said, an emerging technology area that we're telling you about today. I'm watching my attendees. If you guys want to ask some questions, I'm going to make sure I can see the questions panel. All right, so let's review again. So the basic organizing structure of the traditional model, this is the before model of the world as we know it right now. And a lot of school districts that we talk to, they're really dedicated to the traditional model. And the reason they normally say they are is because they are so devoted to the human intersection. They don't see how that could be better. Sort of in the same way that taxi cab companies didn't see how Uber would make rides so much easier and better, faster in most instances. They didn't see it. So that there's no loss of human intersection in the hybrid logistics model. It's actually better. But the devotion to the 250-year-old structure of age, grade, class, course is really high, mostly because it's the way it's always been done. But like I said, the pressure now from the outside world and the lack of teachers is driving the conversation around this model. People are realizing in administration they have to do something about the model. And if you think about it, this model, like it says on this slide, the old model is built to create identical outcomes. It individualizes only within very narrow parameters. So like the typical IEP is something that is channeling that student within the existing structure, trying to keep that student on the same pace as every other student in the same grade. That model, it's a model that is, it's not equitable for a lot of students. If you were a student that just was not really getting math at your grade level, but you were way ahead in language, you're still penalized for the math being behind in math. But maybe in another year, it's suddenly a light bulb goes on for you and you can surge forward even past your own grade. You're held into your grade. So the lack of personalization is becoming really apparent now that there's so much commercial grade software on the scene. Parents are feeling this. They know they can get an ice cream box from Amazon on their front doorstep within 2 hours if they order it while they're at their kid's soccer game. This is the type of logistics that the Learning Council is looking at as being the big thing coming to K-12 soon because of all the reasons that I just said. So this model also, in terms of your teachers, is really overburdening them. Okay, I see a comment from Melvin. Hi, Melvin. Maybe Doug can unmute you if you want to say anything else. So Melvin was asking for the slides. Yes, we will send out the slides post the event. When we send out the thank you email to everybody, you guys will all get the slides, or at least a link to the slides, so we don't blow up your inbox. But Melvin, if you want to say anything, feel free. I unmuted you on my side. All right, so the basic organizing structure of the on-demand model is that all students are Uberized with teachers based on their own pace. That can be small groups. So let's say you set it up initially so that the teacher says every 10th student triggers this live moment when we're going to do a lecture or a hands-on thing. So the next 10 coming in are held in a cohort until the 10th arrives. So the first one that would get there, oh, you've just been put in this cohort. It's awesome. Thank you for arriving, kind of thing. But, go study another subject because you're first in. We'll let you know when this intersection is triggered, this meet is triggered. So every lesson, this is the drawback of this model. This would require schools to actually get their paths fully built. And that's the hard part. Right now, during the pandemic, a lot of teachers would be scrambling to build the next lesson that's going to happen the next hour while students are doing their reading on a previous lesson. So the pre-build for a whole year worth of lessons is kind of an alien ground because we moved into digital. It's not for the competency-based guys, right? Like schools that are running on that, they have everything built. Or for the small schools that are buying content is basically like we used to buy textbooks. Like every lesson is pre-built, it's timed. So figuring that out is the thing that would have to be done in order to get to this other thing. The other couple things that are really critical is your classrooms would have to be magical. They'd have to have audio-visual enhancement. Your networks would have to surge in sophistication. Those are the other things. Every student would have to have a device, and you would have to rearrange how you are using your existing people. But the really great thing that could happen for you is that there will be new careers emerging from a model shift in K-12. So for example, people that are academic lesson builders, supporting your teachers to build branching pathways for students who are not getting it and all that other kind of stuff. Huge increase seen by Learning Council research in that career path, especially digital instructional design, huge increase in that career path. But obviously that already happened in the pandemic, but it would continue more with this particular piece. All right, so that was the before, and then this was and then I showed you the after, and then this is the alternate after, the direction we consider most schools should act on now to actually join the fray of hybrid logistics and algorithmically inferred meetups for teaching and learning. That would be keep your existing structure, but carve out your schedule, all your remediation, and all of your electives and, sort of other things that you want to put on to personalize learning for individual students. So you'd shorten maybe your day and put in an hour, hour and a half of that house room time, rearrange. So maybe one or two of your classrooms are dedicated houses. Kids get to put on the sorting hat at the beginning of the year to be in House Gryffindor. Or, House Slytherin. If you don't know the reference, I'm talking about Harry Potter world. But you definitely then would need the infrastructure to manage your calendar, your schedule, your auto cohorting and all that other stuff. And your lessons would have to be built in with this step here, read this, now watch this video, take this mini quiz. Now this next step, as soon as you arrive, you enter a cohort. So you'd have to have that piece done so that you could actually be Uberized for live meetings. Not hard. It's sort of simple administrative work, but new in terms of how people function. I think most people grasp the concept of Uber, so they would grasp this. You wouldn't even have to move your whole structure to mini cohorts. You could still retain whole group because the teacher would set it at all 30 students arriving, then trigger. In the meantime, fixing whatever's going on that they're not arriving. But you could also, like I said, mini cohort, or even have a cohort of one. All right, so I'm going to go on to this last question. This question is for you, for what you should be doing now to really think about hybrid logistics and your use of time and space. So number one is, what does it mean for schools? Why are we even thinking about this? Why is Learning Council talking about this? They're crazy. We're talking about it because we are looking at the convergence of all of the pressures. Lack of teachers, the consumer expectation now of parents and students, the huge attrition. There's a book called Crossing the Chasm, which is really a book about companies bursting out of obscurity into, high notoriety. Once they pass, I believe it's the 16% mark, Once you get past that with whatever product or service you're providing, there's an avalanche of growth. So if you can cross that chasm, 16% to higher, of respectability for whatever issue or product that you're providing, you can see massive growth. We're already at 33 something percent of loss to alternatives. Some of those are charters, so they're still public, I realize that. But that tells you something really profound about the American mindset. They're looking for what's next. And Learning Council is saying, maybe we don't need to give up traditional and public, and we can still have it all. We can still have 100% personalization. We can have total flexibility. If we have a serious upgrade in the schedule, pacing guide, logistics, and how lessons are delivered to really elevate the human intersection to a perfection point. We all know there's a lot of time wasted in public education. Most of the homeschoolers will say, you know, my student used to go to school every day for 6.5, 7 hours, and I can get everything done in 3 or 2. So where are they using the rest of that time? This is a very common thing if you talk to homeschoolers. They will say this, like I feel like I've wasted, you know, a lot of my kids' life because they're doing stuff that is immaterial to their learning what needs to be learned. So those are the issues. So those are the things that you should really think about. And of course, the second one is traditional. Why is it a tradition? It's worked in the past, but it hasn't worked for everyone. And here's the other really big issue that's going on nationally: equity. Equity is the buzz in schools. Is this equitable? Well, Learning Council contends in that special report that it's not, and it's really because of the structure. Structure is important. All right, so then what are the barriers? And then asking you, be a student and imagine that experience for yourself and what the results might be. Just imagine it. Okay, so I'm going to move on